Welcome to Work from the Inside Out, a podcast that highlights real-life stories, practical strategies, and best practices for transitioning your career from unhappiness and dissatisfaction to fulfillment, meaning, and joy. Now here is your host, career and executive coach, Tammy Guler-Loeb.
Hey, everybody. I am so excited to introduce today's guest, Alicia Butler Pierre. Alicia is the founder and CEO of Equilibria, Inc., a 17-year-old operations management firm. She designs scale-ready business infrastructure for fast-growing small businesses. A chemical engineer turned entrepreneur, she's advised, designed, and optimized processes, enterprises including Shell Oil, Coca-Cola, and the Home Depot. As an international speaker, Alicia hosts the weekly Business Infrastructure Curing Back Office Blues podcast, which ranks in the top 2% in the world with listeners in 60 countries. She's also an adjunct instructor of Lean Principles at Purdue University and the author of the two-time Amazon bestseller, Behind the Facade, How to Structure Company Operations for Sustainable Success. Combined, her online content has over 1 million views and downloads across various platforms. Committed to doing the right things the right way, Alicia's mantra is to leave it better than you found it. Oh, I love that. Well, please join me in welcoming Alicia Butler Pierre. Welcome, Alicia.
Thank you so much, Tammy. What a warm welcome and introduction. I really appreciate that.
Well, I really appreciate having you here today. And as you know, on Work from the Inside Out, we love to learn about your formative years, your earlier years, how you became who you are today. And, you know, sometimes our early years inform that or not, but it's always interesting to find out a little bit about your early life. So take us there.
Thank you. I will take us back down memory lane, Tammy.
Yay.
And my story, you know, it's funny because as I thought about my formative years and how it has really laid a foundation for the types of things that I do now, I realized, so I spent a good bit of my childhood in private Catholic school. So from kindergarten to 8th grade, I was in private Catholic school. And here's the thing about going to Catholic school in particular, the nuns, everything was very methodical. Everything was process oriented. There was a sort of rhythm and cadence to everything that we did. Very ritualistic also, you know, that's the religious component. And then my parents, my dad was in the Air Force.
Oh.
My mother was a health inspector.
Oh.
And so I can remember certain things like you never leave the house without making up your bed and making up the bed, you know, military style. And my mom would perform these inspections of our rooms before we left to go to school every morning. So she had an eagle's eye for detail and dirt and uncleanliness.
Wow.
So you know, I never thought about those things, Tammy, growing up. But, you know, now that I'm older and I reflect back on those years, I realize, wow, that really did lay the foundation for me being as methodical and process oriented and sometimes ritualistic with some of the things that I do when I'm working with my clients.
Interesting. That's really... Now, let me ask you this. I can't help it. I have to ask you. Did you have to bounce a quarter off your bed?
I did not have to bounce a quarter off of my bed, but I remember the corner. There's something about the way you do the corners, you know, the way you tuck the corners of the sheets and the blanket, you know, Thank you, Daddy. Okay. Thank you for that.
Well, it sounds like you took it all in stride, too. I could see where some kids might have, you know, felt like I got the rules at school and then all the rules at home. And when do I get to just sort of let loose a little bit? But it sounds like it suited you quite well.
Well, I let loose once I became free of school.
And when was
because I was
that?
living in New Orleans when I finally let free. And that
Oh,
was, yeah, right. Party City, Party City. So
yeah.
I was in my early 20s after I
Uh-huh.
finished college.
Uh-huh.
And I made up, Tammy, for all those years when I couldn't party with all of my other friends and classmates, because I was stuck in a lab studying, doing homework, or studying for an exam or something like that. So I certainly made up for lost time.
Wow. So you went to school and you studied chemical engineering. Is that right?
Yes. So I should probably mention high school. So I went from
Oh,
kindergarten to eighth
oh,
grade.
yes.
I went from kindergarten to eighth grade in private school. And then during high school, so ninth grade to 12th grade, I actually went to a magnet school, a college preparatory magnet school. And it was there, Tammy, where I always thought I wanted to become a journalist. That was my first love. Believe it or not, English literature, the arts, that was my first love. And when I was in about 11th grade, I took a chemistry course. That was the science that we had to take. It was required. And my teacher, and interestingly enough, she was Ukrainian, Mrs.
Oh,
Kablis, Mrs. Kablis, and I absolutely fell in love with chemistry. I was so good at it. It came very natural to me, just as natural as writing came to me. Well, back then at that time, as natural as writing came to me. And by my last year of high school, we at my school you had to take four sciences. So all 4 years,
yep.
four sciences.
Hmm.
Most students took physics, but I actually opted to take an advanced chemistry course because I loved it just that much. And during that time, during my very last year in high school, Mrs. Kablis took a vested interest in what I was going to pursue once I got to college. And I told her chemistry. And she said, well, here's the thing. You would have to go up to the PhD level before you start to make real money.
Uh,
You might want to consider chemical engineering. And here's what's funny, Tammy. My school had an engineering program. I wasn't a part of it. I had no interest or desire for it. But yet here I was, my very last year of school in high school. My teacher is suggesting chemical engineering. And I just said, okay. I didn't know any chemical engineers. I hadn't done any real research on it, but because Mrs. Kablis said it, I did it. I pursued it. So yes, when I went to college at Louisiana State University, that was the degree that I pursued, a Bachelor of Science in Chemical Engineering. To this day is the most difficult thing I have ever done in my life.
yeah.
Um, but it taught me so much. It taught me rigor. It
Mm,
taught me dedication. It
mm.
taught me the importance of accuracy and precision and how to think logically. Every problem that I approach now, even to this day, I'm 46 years old now, and everything is approached very logically. So that has been so ingrained and so hardwired into me that I will forever be grateful for that because I could be working. I mean, I've worked in so many different types of industries outside of what most people would think of as being core or traditional chemical engineering. And I always just divert back to that scientific method, where you form a there's a problem and then you form a hypothesis and then there's observation and then you perform the experiment and the conclusion. So I use the scientific method almost every single time I'm trying to approach or solve some type of problem. So that I'm so glad you asked the question about my formative years because it really truly did lay the foundation for so much of what I do now.
That's so interesting. And and yet, we know that today you're working with businesses,
Yes.
and and I see the tie-in, with those early years in Catholic school and the rigor and the structure you had there, and how that carried through to your education in engineering, um, and and how you're bringing that to your clients now, and yet there's this other part of you, it sounds like. Maybe I'm making a presumption, so feel free to correct me. but yet there's a part of you that decided to switch gears to some degree and move into the role that you're in now, where you are providing consulting, some coaching to your clients, the businesses you're working with. And while there are some of those same skills, you decided to depart from the more hands-on engineering role. Although I want to hear more about your years as an engineer, because I'm curious to hear about where you worked as an engineer where you would think somebody wouldn't. I'm very curious. But it's still, you think the way you've described this, the rigor, the dedication, the logic, the accuracy, it's almost like painting a picture of somebody who wouldn't have that kind of facility or flexibility that clearly you've had to make some of the transitions you have in your career. So I'll leave it at that and let you continue on with your delightful story.
That is such an astute observation, because I guess if you did look at it on paper, I would appear to be very rigid, inflexible, not friendly, not down to earth. And that's what's so funny. I'm like the anti-engineer, I guess, in many ways when it comes to that, because I do have personality and I am down to earth and I do love meeting people. And it's so funny you mentioned that, Tammy, because I remember my very first job out of college was at Monsanto. And I always preface it by saying, don't judge me for that. Okay. Because
yeah,
that was my very first job. I was making Roundup, the weed killer, the herbicide. Yeah, I was making poison, Tammy. And, I was just so excited to have a job.
Yeah.
And one of the things when I worked at Monsanto, every year there was a performance evaluation. And all of the young engineers were always asked the same question. Do you want to stay on the technical path or the managerial path? And I always chose technical, yet they were trying to push me toward the managerial path. And it used to really frustrate me. And it took many years after those experiences, Tammy, for me to really understand and appreciate why they thought I was better suited for the managerial path. They saw something in me that I didn't even see in myself. I didn't realize it was a skill, but they noticed my ability to communicate with anyone at that plant, at that particular chemical plant. So whether we're talking about operators some of whom have never even finished high school, I could communicate with the managers. I could communicate with the leaders, the frontline supervisors. I could even communicate with the C-suite. And I didn't understand and appreciate that was a very rare skill. And that was why they were always trying to push me along that managerial path. And I resisted because at that point in my life, I was tired of people telling me what they thought I should do.
Oh,
yeah. So I was pushing back like, no, I went to school for 5 years to practice this craft. And now I have the opportunity to do that. And you're telling me I should instead move in this direction. How dare you?
Right.
So but eventually I did go rogue and I did go the business managerial path. and the reason, the way that came about, Tammy.
Yeah, I'm curious.
So at Monsanto, when you're in a chemical plant, there's usually different, what we call units. There's different sections of the plant that are responsible for producing a specific material that eventually goes into, let's say, the finished product, which in this case was Roundup. There was an accountant who was assigned to every single unit. That accountant would visit us once a month. And this was, you can tell this was back in the day because remember those old school computer printouts with it was like 11 by 17 sheets of paper with the perforated tabs.
Yeah, the dot matrix printers.
Those. Yeah. Remember those?
I'm old enough to remember them. Yes. And I'm older than you,
There
so
must there might be some people, I'm sure you have listeners who are younger listening and they're like,
like,
what are they talking about?
what?
And she would have these thick reports that she would bring. And I remember we would all sit together in a conference room and she would talk through these reports. And Tammy, it was like she was speaking a different language.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure.
Profit and liabilities and equity and assets and debt to equity ratio. And it's like, whoa, what is she talking about? And I was completely clueless. And the other thing, so there was that part, but then the other part was what seemed to be erratic, irrational production schedules. One day, Tammy, we could be told to operate at full speed, operate at 100% capacity. The next day, we're told, well, scale back to about 50%. We don't need you to produce 10,000 gallons, only produce 5,000. And then the day after that, we might be told to shut down altogether. And then after that, by the end of the week, we're told, oh, yeah, ramp it back up full capacity. So it just seemed manic. So that combined with me not understanding the language of business, accounting, led me to pursue my MBA. And that is what truly opened my eyes to the world of commerce. And I found a new love. So I started working full-time during the day, going to school at night in Tulane University's professional MBA program. And I just couldn't get enough of it. The other reason is because as I was learning different concepts and theories in school, I could literally apply it or see it in action as I was working.
Yeah.
And I wish I had that experience as an engineer. I had internships, but it wasn't the same. There's something about learning and then practicing what you learn, like right there, as you're learning these concepts.
I totally agree. I did the same exact thing getting my MBA. I worked during the day and went at night, and it made a huge difference because at one point I went full time and did go during the day to classes for one semester. And it was like going to a whole new program. And I went back I actually returned back to the night classes because I realized I wanted to be in school with all the other working professionals.
Yep.
Yeah.
It makes a huge difference.
Tremendous. Yeah. I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah. So you worked during the day at Monsanto.
Yes.
And then went to Tulane at night. And at least from what I recall doing that, you basically don't have a minute to yourself ever.
No, you don't. You don't. And I should probably also mention, I eventually left Monsanto and started working at a small family-owned engineering consulting firm. And that, Tammy, is what started to open my eyes to small businesses. And the culture was different. The difference was like night and day. You go from being in this huge multinational corporation where everything is siloed. There's bureaucracy. There's all the things we hear about, all the bad stuff, right, that we hear about being in a large corporation, to this small family-owned business that I probably had less than 250 employees. There was no moving up the ladder, so to speak.
Right.
So you could truly focus on your work. And because we had to charge billable hours, that was something else I wasn't accustomed to. Because when I worked in corporate, I was a salaried employee. And even though at this consulting firm, I was still considered a salaried employee, I still all of my hours had to be accounted for.
Right.
So there was no room for water cooler talk, gossip, mess, bureaucracy, silos. You had to get the work done because you had to be held accountable to your clients. So I really enjoyed working there as well.
And so what made you decide to make, that was a pretty radical move, actually, going from such a large conglomerate to such a small, different company. What made you decide to make that kind of a move? Or maybe it just sort of happened. I don't know, but
Well,
curious.
9/11 has a lot to do with it.
Oh, really?
9/11, I was attending an environmental engineering conference in Kalamazoo, Michigan when 9/11 happened. I will
Okay.
never forget. I know it's one of those situations where if you were living at that time and old enough to remember it, you
Yeah.
never forget where you were when
That's
that
right.
happened.
That's right.
And at the time, I had just started my MBA program at Tulane. And it just so happened, Tammy, that the courses that I signed up for that very first semester, your grade was largely based on attendance. Well, I literally could not be in class because of I was stuck, stranded in Michigan. I couldn't get back to New Orleans. And by the time I did make it back to New Orleans, I realized I had missed enough class to where it was probably, it would significantly affect my grades. And I decided to drop. I dropped all of the courses. I ended up having to sit out another year before I could start again. Because as you know, with certain courses are only offered at certain times of
Right.
the year. So I
Yeah.
was going to have to wait an entire year.
Yeah.
Well, during that year, I did a lot of soul searching, introspection, really thinking. And I made a decision, either this job goes or I completely forfeit my dream to learn more about business. And as fate would have it, Tulane I'm not sure if they still have it, but it was a program, an organization rather, called TEA, and it stands for Tulane Entrepreneurs Association. And it was a club, professional club on the campus that would meet once a month. And they usually had a different guest speaker that was a local entrepreneur in the New Orleans community. And it just so happened a man by the name of Joseph Wink spoke. It was a Friday. Check this out, Tammy. We're talking about New Orleans, Louisiana, a Friday evening at 7 p.m. I'm at the time about 23, 24. There were a lot of other things I could have done, Tammy, rather than going and I think you know where I'm going with this,
Yeah.
rather than going to a club meeting and listening to an entrepreneur give a lecture. Something told me I needed to be there. And I'm so glad that I went because I was listening to him tell his story as an entrepreneur. He actually suffered a mental breakdown after the first time he tried to start his consulting firm, but then he picked himself back up, started, and the second time around, he was successful. I went up to him afterward and I asked, Mr. Wink, do you hire chemical engineers? He said, I sure do. And I said, do you happen to have a need for any right now? And he said, as a matter of fact, we do. That's how I started working at my next job.
Wow.
It happened 2 months later because I had to go through a round of interviews and things like that. So about 2 months after that chance encounter on a Friday night in New Orleans, Louisiana, I ended up meeting the person who would become my next boss.
Wow. And it wasn't like you were on some big job search or something.
No, not at all. Not at all. It was literally and I know this might sound kind of woo to some people who are listening, but you really do have to be intentional about what you want in life. And I think you have to reach, unfortunately, sometimes, I know this is how it is for me. You have to become so uncomfortable with the situation that you're in. And you have to think clearly about what you do want and focus less on what you don't like about what's going on in your life right now, but rather focus on what you do want and start to align yourself and put yourself in positions to be able to accept the opportunities as they present themselves. And so again, I could have easily instead hung out with friends. I could have gone to some type of a party that night. I mean, there's no shortage of fun things to do in New Orleans as a 20-something-year-old.
Yeah.
But I instead said, no, I'm serious about this. I'm experiencing enough discomfort where I'm currently employed to make me want to go and hear what this man has to say.
And you had no idea whether it was going to be worthwhile or not, but you just knew this, and actually that's such a great work from the inside out story, because you said you set an intention, but you also followed your instincts. But that doesn't mean that every time you follow your instincts that it's going to result, in a job per se, right? But you trusted yourself and you went for it and you showed up, and it worked out.
That's right.
Right.
And you said something so key, showing up.
Mm-hmm.
That's a huge part of it.
Yeah.
I remember at the time I had another friend. We also went to college together. She was also working with me at Monsanto. She was also miserable, and she's still there to this day. Crying, and we would kind of trade war stories about things that were going on at work that just frustrated us. We were so stressed out, but she didn't leave. She was so fearful that someone would find out that she's applying for other jobs. And I was like, you know what? As the saying goes, you miss 100% of the shots that you don't take.
That's
you got to
right.
just kind of put yourself out there and show up.
Yeah.
Show up.
Yep. Absolutely. So at that point, you had to wait out that year, and then you were able to start school again. You were at the consulting firm working for the Wink family, it sounds like, right?
Yes, it was called Wink Engineering.
Wink Engineering. I bet they had a cute logo or something.
Actually, it was really plain and basic. It was just a square with with some lines inside of the square. It was very, very basic.
Oh, okay. I'm of course I'm imagining something more cute, like anyway, an eye winking or something.
An eye, yeah. No.
But anyway, how long did you stay with the consulting firm?
I was there, was it about, let's see, 2.5 or 3 years? Long enough to finish school. So it was probably more like 2.5 years that I was there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when something else happened that led to my eventual push into entrepreneurship.
Oh, well, tell us.
Now that's a story, Tammy.
All right.
Okay, so I'm living in New Orleans, and mind you, I'm a native Louisianian, so I am no stranger to hurricanes, tropical storms, heavy rains. I know the drill. However, New Orleans truly is a bowl. And when you hear people talk about the fact that it's 6 feet below sea level, let me just give you a visual of what that really means. My house was 2 blocks off of the levee of the Mississippi River. Whenever I would see a Carnival cruise ship or any type of cruise ship, it looked like a skyscraper. If I looked out of the window of my house, these boats are massive, and they looked like yet one of the other buildings that made up the skyline.
Yeah.
And that's when you realize, like, oh, wow, this boat is literally sitting up higher than I am. And it's like, oh my gosh, and it floods very easily there, very easily. And so around late August, early September of 2004, there was a tropical storm moving through. I was at work at the small family-owned engineering consulting firm. I shared an office with my boss. Her name was Stephanie D'Antonio. And it's raining. And at that time of the year, everyone's glued to the Weather Channel. You're just glued to it because hurricanes and tropical storms, they change directions very quickly, very easily. And I was starting to get nervous, and I asked if I could go home and finish working from home. And she said, okay, Alicia, I think you're you're exaggerating, but if you want to work from home for the rest of the day, sure, go ahead. Knock yourself out. It was around 11:30 that morning. By the time I got home, it was 12 o'clock noon, and I lived in a very old house. My house was built in 1850.
Wow.
So it was really old. And most of those old homes in New Orleans, they sit about anywhere from 4 to 6 feet, if not more, off the ground. And there was no driveway or anything like that. I lived in an old historic neighborhood, so you had to park your car on the street. And by the time I got home, it was about 12 o'clock noon. I go inside, and there's about 10 minutes later, one of my neighbors comes banging on my door to let me know that water was about to get into my car. So just that quickly, the water started rising. And I tell people this all the time. When it's raining like that and water no longer has any other place to go, the ground can no longer absorb it. There aren't any more storm drains that can absorb the water. It has no choice but to start rising. Right. And it rises very quickly. So imagine this, everyone who's listening. By the time I get outside, I didn't even grab an umbrella. I just had a raincoat, rain shoes, get inside my car, and I'm in search of higher ground. Because when you live there, you're always taught that the closer you get to the levee of the river, the higher the ground is. Now, I was 2 blocks off the levee, and I parked my car at one of the utility companies. They had a very small location inside of my neighborhood. So I parked in their parking lot. And by the time I was starting to walk back home, the water was above my knees. That's how fast it rose.
Whoa.
So I'm panicking. I'm freaking out. I make it home. And the other thing you have to be careful of is, once the street is covered, you can't distinguish between the street and the sidewalk, a manhole cover. Manhole covers can pop open. It's scary. Yeah. It is very scary. And so I'm treading through the water. I make it home. I get inside. I'm completely panicked because I lived alone. And I recall looking out of my kitchen window, Tammy, and all of a sudden I had this thought, true story. I had this thought, you won't be here by this time next year. Now, remember, this is around late August, early September 2004. So I thought I was hallucinating. Eventually, the rain stops. The water pumps are turned on. The waters recede. It's disgusting. After a hurricane or a tropical storm, it is absolutely disgusting because the water has washed up all of this trash and debris and all kinds of other stuff, and it's just a mess. But after that experience, I had get out on my mind. I couldn't explain it. It was the first time I can truly say that I ever acted upon my gut feeling or my intuition. Something told me, you have to get out of here, quick, fast, and in a hurry. It didn't make sense because I had a very comfortable life, Tammy. I had a home. I was young. I had a car. Didn't have any debt from college. I had a nice, well-paying job. I was doing well. So why on earth would I disrupt all of that and venture into the unknown? But something told me I had to do it. So I quit my job abruptly later that September of 2004, graduated from my MBA program in December of 2004, January 2005, put my house up for sale. It sold within the first week. Wow. And by February of 2005, I was in Atlanta, Georgia, where I knew one person. And that one person that I knew, Kenneth O'Rourke, one of my high school classmates, he was actually leaving as I was coming into Atlanta. He was leaving. So, I must have been crazy, right? And I moved into an apartment. And 6 months later, Hurricane Katrina happened, which was
thinking about Katrina.
Which was August of 2005. So that was another time where I truly acted on my gut. I didn't question it. I couldn't shake the feeling. And I know this might sound odd if anyone who's listening, if you've never experienced this before, but sometimes you just have this nagging, persistent feeling. It won't go away. You're trying to rationalize it. Yeah. And you can't. It just won't go away. And you really won't have any rest until you act upon that feeling.
Right.
And that's what I did. And thank God that I did.
Yeah.
That's how I ended up in Atlanta.
Wow. That's fascinating, especially given how much of your life had so much structure in it and so much sort of in your head logic, right?
Yep.
And there was your intuition screaming at you and you listened to it. And I know that a lot of people don't always do that.
Yes.
And they regret it later. And which is why we call this work from the inside out. So you moved to Atlanta, and And you said that this really tied in with you doing what you're doing today.
Mm-hmm.
So let's take us there.
Sure. And I should probably mention the judgment. Oh my gosh, the questioning.
Oh, I'm sure.
Of the questioning of my sanity. So yes, that's definitely something that anyone who's listening, you have to quiet those voices because they will definitely be there. People asking you, have you lost your mind? Are you crazy? I remember one of my coworkers telling me the grass isn't greener on the other side. And I responded to him, well, I have to find out for myself.
Yes. Yep.
So yes, I end up in Atlanta, Georgia, Tammy. And I thought, wow, this is the land of milk and honey compared to where I came from. Are you kidding? I mean, they had Coca-Cola headquartered here and Delta Airlines, Chick-fil-A, Home Depot, UPS. I'm looking at all of these companies and the diversity of the companies. And I came here truly thinking I was going to land a job at Coca-Cola. I was going to leverage my engineering background with my newly minted MBA. Who wouldn't want to hire me, Tammy? I mean, I'm a good catch. That's what I'm telling myself. Yeah. And then I get here and I realize, well, there are a lot of other really smart, very talented people here. The competition was fierce. And this was around the time when everything was starting to go online. So it was a very interesting transition because you didn't always receive an answer. If you went through the trouble of filling out an application online, you tailor you customize your cover letter and your resume according to that particular job description, and you don't hear anything. And after about 2 months of what seemed to be soulless, endless job searching, I decided, you know what? For the same amount of time, effort, and energy that I'm spending trying to get a job, a job, just over broke, working for someone else, I should redirect that same time, effort, and energy into creating an opportunity for myself. And it just so happened around that time, it's so funny how things happen in life. Everything that I happened to be reading, whether it was a book, whether it was a documentary that I watched, whether it was an article that I read in a newspaper or in a magazine, talked about the fact that we're all blessed with these natural skills, talents, and abilities. But through our process of quote unquote miseducation in our school systems, we're really taught to get away from what naturally may bring you joy or what you may naturally be really good at. And instead, we're being trained and prepped to go and work for someone else and not how to capitalize on those natural skills, talents, and abilities. And so I started reflecting on what is it that I'm just naturally very good at? And I've always been very good at organizing, Tammy. And no matter what job I had, whether I was flipping burgers as a teenager, selling shoes at a local department store when I was in college, or working as an engineer, I was good at what I did, not because I was the smartest person in the room, but because I was very organized.
Yeah.
And that's how Equilibria started, as a professional organizing company, believe it or not.
Oh, okay.
So I was organizing closets and garages, but the overwhelming majority of the clients that I worked with were home-based business owners.
Oh.
So these were not chronically disorganized people. They were not hoarders by any stretch of the imagination. They needed processes. And that's where I started tapping into my chemical engineering background as a process engineer and my business skills that I had picked up from my MBA, and all of that just kind of beautifully meshed together to start providing these solutions. And eventually, Tammy, I met a marketing consultant who said, you know, what you're doing, this is more than just professional organizing. This is business infrastructure, Alicia.
Yeah.
And eventually I stopped working in people's homes and actually started working in brick and mortar businesses. And
Yeah.
here's how naive I was, Tammy, at the time. I'll never forget a local district attorney's office called me. They had seen me on a local television program here talking about the importance of being organized. And they said, we need you to come and help us. And I thought, organizations are disorganized too? Like, that's how naive I was, because I came from a world of engineering where everything was very structured and there were processes for everything and everything was documented and you always knew what to do and there was always troubleshooting protocol. So I truly didn't know that businesses could be dysfunctional because I had never experienced it. So that was my introduction to, wow, okay, so businesses can be organized. And that's how eventually it morphed into what it is today.
Wow. So it's been, I'm trying to do the math. It's been
17 years.
17 years. Okay.
17 years.
So you really, this has evolved over time quite a bit, right?
Absolutely.
And you also have other offerings now too. It's not just you directly consulting to your clients. You have an online course, right?
Right.
Called Smooth Operator. Tell us about that.
Sure. Well, I have to give credit to our friend, Dory Clark. I had the pleasure of interviewing Dory on my podcast, and we were talking about scaling. And she said, you have to go from a one-to-one more transactional relationship to one-to-many and eventually many-to-many.
Right.
And so I started thinking, how can I truly scale my own business? I'm telling other companies how to scale through business infrastructure, but how can I scale Equilibria? Well, this course is one of those ways. So with consulting, don't get me wrong, I love consulting. It's very rewarding. It's fulfilling, but it's one-on-one. And when you produce something like a course, you have the opportunity to create something and potentially reach thousands of people at the same time.
Right.
That's how you scale. So that's what the course is about. It's based on a framework that I've developed for creating business infrastructure. It's really cool. It's video demonstrations. So it's not just me being a talking head, just rambling off about different things about building business infrastructure. It's literally demonstration videos.
Oh.
And there are templates, there are worksheets, there's all kinds of really cool tools that you can download to build your business infrastructure, accompanied also by some articles as well as some podcast episodes as well. So it's giving people who have different ways of learning. There's a little bit of something for everyone. So if you learn by watching, or you learn by reading, or you learn by hearing, there's something for everyone.
That's great. And I know you also have a YouTube channel in addition to your podcast. So there's lots of ways for people to learn about what you do and understand the different ways that you go about offering people ideas about systems and processes in their businesses. Are there certain industries that you specialize in? And are there ways in which your chemical engineering background still plays a role in your work? Or is that less of an emphasis now?
Sure. So it's industry agnostic. I've worked with all kinds of companies in all kinds of different industries, whether it's retail or law or other consulting firms. It could be 2 weeks ago, funny you mentioned how my chemical engineering background, whether or not it still comes into play. I was at a production facility, a manufacturing company. Now, here's the thing about working with the manufacturing companies now. I'm looking more so at their other back office operations and not the core production or manufacturing processes, because they already have engineers there. They already know how to do that stuff, right?
Yeah.
But when it comes to the accounting department, the HR department, the IT department, all of those other supportive services or roles that still make up a company, that's where the kind of assistance may be needed, in terms of systems and processes.
Yeah, that makes sense. Is there anything that we didn't touch upon? I know that you have many more stories you could tell about
Oh gosh, there's so
your
many stories.
journey, but I'm curious if there's something else that we didn't touch upon in this conversation that you want to make sure our listeners hear about.
Well, I would just say if anyone who's listening, if you're curious, well, what the heck is business infrastructure? And it's just simply a system for linking the people, the processes, and the tools and technologies that make up your company, linking them together so that whenever there's a change or a modification of some sort in one of those areas, you understand the impact that it has on the others. And that's having that kind of foundation is what not only enables you to grow your business, or even if you're just within a company, if you want to grow your team, but it also helps you do that in a sustainable, profitable, and repeatable way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's great. And if somebody wanted to get in touch with you or learn more about Equilibria, what's the best way for them to find you?
I would say the best way to find me and all things that I'm into, including the business, is my personal website, which is aliciabutlerpierre.com.
Okay.
There you can find out how we can connect on social. You can find out about the book, the podcast, as well as Equilibria, my business.
Great. And we will have all of that in the show notes. We have lots and lots of links because you definitely are a great communicator, Alicia.
Oh,
You have
thank you.
a lot of ways of reaching people and sharing information with people. You're very generous in that way. I am going to ask you to indulge us by answering one more question.
Of course.
That is, so a lot of our listeners are interested in making their own transition. What would be a key piece of advice you would give to someone else who's considering their what's next?
Let go of what others think.
Mm.
It's so easy to say that, but it is so hard to do that. But you will feel so liberated when you do. Think about all of the programming that we've received over the years as we've been growing up, what to do, what not to do, how to dress, how not to dress, how to wear your hair, how not to wear your hair. All of these things, don't do that career. That's crazy. You'll never make money. Listen, let go of what other people think and focus on what brings you joy. Because when you show up fully doing something that you truly love, and I know it sounds cliche, I know so many people say this, but it really is true. You can put your heart and soul into something, and I promise you, it will pay tenfold. Tammy, I'm sure you know people who are in these stressful situations. They want to desperately get out of it, and it manifests itself usually, unfortunately, in the form of disease.
Oh, absolutely. And if not, all kinds of diseases, whether they're physical or mental. But
right.
People suffer and they think they're doing the right thing. That's
right.
that's the thing that makes it even more difficult is they think they're doing the right thing, but they don't realize sometimes till later, if never, that they actually really compromised themselves for the sake of some ideas that they thought other people were thinking. And sometimes, more often than not, they're ideas that they've carried around their whole lives that maybe somebody shared with them a long time ago or never. Yeah. And we're not mind readers. We really don't know what other people are thinking.
That's so
we might as well
true.
go with our own thoughts.
That's right.
Well, Alicia, this has been fabulous. I thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, thank you, Tammy.
Wishing you all the best going forward with Equilibria. I know that you have tremendous resources to offer. Lots of people. And I'm just delighted to have you here. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Tammy.
I hope you enjoyed my interview with Alicia Butler Pierre. It was so interesting to speak with her and learn about her extraordinary career journey and her interests. What is your key takeaway from our interview? If you are interested in any of the resources mentioned in today's podcast, you can find them in the show notes on my website at tammygulerloeb.com/podcast. Just look for episode 208. Are you anticipating your next professional move? Check out my award-winning book, Work from the Inside Out: Break Through 9 Common Obstacles and Design a Career That Fulfills You. It's available in print and ebook editions through my website, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, independent bookstores, or through your local library. If you were inspired by this episode with Alicia, please share it with your friends and colleagues, and please do subscribe so you don't miss next week's show. Remember, subscribing is always free. Are you enjoying the podcast? I'd be so grateful to see your written review on Apple Podcasts. It's easy to find. Just go to my website, tammygulerloeb.com/podcast. Just click on the Apple Podcast button and follow the instructions provided there. You can also help sustain the podcast by buying me a cup of coffee. Just go to buymeacupofcoffee.com/TammyGL. Since the podcast is self-funded, I would so appreciate your support. Thank you so much for listening. And remember, it's never too late or too impossible to increase your sense of fulfillment and satisfaction in your work and other meaningful activities. Let me know how it's going for you. I'd love to hear from you. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to the Work from the Inside Out podcast. For more information, you can find us at www.workfromtheinsideout.com.